Okay, so now we're ready to get into our Python script with the SQL commands that we worked out in the client. We're going to use the drop table, if exists command, and the create table, and we're going to put them into Python. So the first thing we're going to need to do is connect to the database, and it's easy enough to do that. We just have to make sure to use the correct database path from here. It's assuming, again, that we're in the project directory. And if you're not entirely sure, there are ways you can find out. You could, if you want, and I kind of recommend this, use the os get cwd command to see exactly where your notebook thinks the current directory is. You can see that this is my session 5 working files folder in my desktop, and that's exactly where I've been working before from the SQLite client. You can also see that I'm being extra careful in knowing this, and again, that's because one of the terrible quirks of SQLite 3 is that if you're in the wrong place or if you misspell the name of the database, it's just going to create a new one in that place and not say anything to you. I find it extremely frustrating because you can be working and working on some other database you're not aware of, and then you go looking for it later and it's not where you thought it was. So it's good that we know where we are. We're going to begin by opening the database, and we do that first by importing SQLite and then connecting to the database. SQLite 3, I should say. And now we're going to use data and ip.db. Now, of course, if you're doing the homework right now, this is going to be the product DB. And don't also forget that if you're on Windows, it's probably going to be a backslash. And so in that case, I would say now probably the / will work for you on Windows. And on Windows, though, they use backslashes. And if we're going to use a backslash, you have to put an R in front of your string. So that would be part of the connect string that you put into the parentheses. Okay. So we're connecting to the database. We could even run this and see that it works. Didn't see any output. Good. Now I want to drop table if exists and create table. Personally, I'd sort of like to see if I'm on the right track and do I have the right place, but let's just issue these commands. So sometimes it might be useful just to put the commands as separate queries in separate strings. Actually, I know that I have that initial create table, so why don't I just copy it? I don't need the semicolon. And I'm going to make it nice and pretty. That's why I like triple quoted strings. And now I can execute my queries. I'm going to need to create a cursor object. Forgot to do that. This is just de rigueur. It's what we do. Now, if everything's in order, I won't see a result at all. What I'm seeing here with SQLite 3 cursor is the value from the execute statement. You don't need to capture this. You don't have to say c = c.execute. It looks like execute does return the cursor object again. I'm just going to ignore it for now. It doesn't matter that that came back. This cursor object is still associated with C, so I'll just work with that. And I can execute these too. Now, how do I know that this succeeded? Well, I actually don't. I could play with this though, and maybe recreate it with, maybe I'll just put in a variant here. I'll have 2 integers, 2 text. I'm not going to do this for my final, but there is one way I guess I could confirm what I'm doing. I'll just execute it and then go back to my SQLite, look at tables, and oh, one thing I forgot though, and I've got to remember to do this, I keep forgetting, is to commit the result. So I have to commit the result. After committing the result and I don't see anything, hopefully I can now get the schema of IP, and I'll actually see that it has the new design, integer, integer, text, text. Now that's not what I actually want. I actually want integer, integer, integer text. Isn't that right? And so I'm going to put it back and run it again and check out my schema. And I see now it's integer, integer, integer text. Great. So what have I done here? Well, I dropped the table and recreated it in a single script. And if you have this at the top of your homework for the ETL script, and you use this to drop and create your product table, you'll be able to start fresh every time you run this ETL script. So you won't have to worry about what's in the table. You won't have to worry about what the structure of the table is. You can just recreate it using this script. And this is something we call wipe and reload. It's a best practice in the sense that you don't have to keep track of what you have done. You can just redo everything. And it's easy enough to do it, obviously. It's like, look, I'm making angels. No, I'm making tables here. Look at that. I'm making tables. I'm just hitting it over and over and over again. See up here, the number is changing up here as I execute over and over and over again the drop and create, drop and create. That's wipe and reload.